So today, as we get started and get back into our Sermon on the Mount, I need you to, of course, have Matthew 7, as that's where we left off last week, where we'll continue today. I also want you to turn first to Luke chapter 13. Luke chapter 13, I think it's appropriate for us to look at Luke 13 before getting into Matthew 7. And you'll see why as we address both of them. We've been seeing this common thread throughout the Sermon on the Mount, that this Sermon on the Mount being Jesus' first big sermon to the community, he's hit on several topics. And each of these topics we've taken to see where he brings it back through one of his interactions with someone else. And we've seen this in a number of occasions, the same subject matter coming back through an interaction. And I before we even get into reading the passage, that's the thing about our relationship with Christ. We come to know Christ in a certain way, then we take that and we learn how to apply it into our lives or with our interactions with others. He teaches us something about himself or about ourselves. And then we take that and we leave here, and how can I then put that into practice in my everyday life? Or whenever I find myself interacting with someone else. And that's what we see in Scripture or through the Sermon on the Mount, and how Jesus says, okay, so these are the fundamentals, and now how did we see him transfer that into his interactions? Luke chapter 13 is one of those times. Look down at verse 22, please. Then Jesus went through the towns and villages, teaching as he made his way to Jerusalem. And someone asked him, Lord, are only a few going to be saved? And he said to them, make every effort to enter through the narrow door, because many, I tell you, will try to enter and will not be able to do so. Once the owner of the house gets up and closes the door, you will stand outside knocking and pleading, Sir, open the door for us. But he will answer, I don't know you, or where you come from. And then you will say, we ate and drank with you, and you taught in our streets. But he will reply, I don't know you, or where you come from. Away from me, all you evil doers. Interesting passage, to say the least, isn't it? Interesting passage. Now, I want you to take a look at it, and I want you to answer me this. Who is Jesus referring to? Now, these are people who thought that they were going to make it through the door because they, quote, ate and drank with Jesus. Or they ate and drank with the owner of the house. These are people who listened, who knew of him, who dined with him. And yet the owner says in response, yet I don't know you. I suppose you could say that this is one of those let's talk reality moments that Jesus had with people, especially with the Pharisees and the Sadducees and those who just loved their religion so much around him, who were listening to him because he was such a profound teacher. And they were inquisitive. This all started because of a question, but this isn't something that Jesus taught just the one time. Now go to Matthew chapter 25. Matthew 25, we find a similar illustration down in verse 31 of Matthew 25. I love hearing the pages turning. I'm so glad to hear that this morning. Matthew 25, look down at verse 31. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? And the king will reply, I tell you the truth. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. Then he will say to those on his left, Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me. And they will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you? He will reply, I tell you the truth. Whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. Again, similar to the Luke 13 passage, we have this passage where Jesus talks about our earthly ministry, our community ministries, and the role that it plays in signifying who is Lord of our life. For in this passage, what it basically says is not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of God. When did we see you? So let me ask you, want a third example? Let's look at Matthew chapter 7. Because here is the foundation. This is when, if the Sermon on the Mount is the foundation for Jesus' ministry, his first sermon to the public that we have recorded, that is, the first sermon to the public, that here he's laying down the foundation to following him by faith. Matthew 7, verse 13. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Now this is our next step in our Sermon on the Mount series. This is our focal passage today, and it's a doozy. And we recognize what is spoken here, the truths that's spoken here, in light and in reference to Matthew 25 and Luke 13 and others, but I wanted us to see the similarity. This is one of those passages that offends. This is one of those places, one of those statements by Christ that offends. And it offends us because man wants their salvation to be easy. We want to be saved, and that is if we determine that we need to be saved from something. But for the most part, we want our salvation to be easy. Easy to come by and easy to get. We want the call to the faith-filled life to be simple. Jesus is very clear that it is not simple. Some would say, all you have to do is pray a believer's prayer. We make it simple. All you have to do, really, all, underline, all you have to do. I read 3 passages here that stated that where Jesus says that the path is narrow, that the gate is narrow. We want it to sound easy. We want it to be easy. Some of us have believed over the years that all I had to do was get my name on a church roll. And we want it to be easy. No expectations. Just get my name on the church roll. People are looking for whatever way they can. But Jesus said there is only one way. There is only one means. Now, this morning, I want to share with you, for those of you that have been here over the years, I have shared and used Lee Strobel as a reference a number of times. We have his movie on hand where it shows his salvation story, basically. It's a movie about his salvation story. We had a movie night, I think 3 years ago, where we showed that, and we have that on file. He's written books like The Case for Faith. I have a half a dozen of those books if you'd like to read it. Case for a Creator. He has a lot of The Case of. And the reason why he writes these books, The Case of, is because he used to write for the Chicago Tribune. He was kind of like an investigative reporter type of thing. And back in the early 80s, when his wife came to Christ, him being an atheist, decided that he was going to prove Christianity is false. And so he set out over a number of weeks and wrote a series of articles as he went around the globe and interviewed people, all in the effort to deem Christianity as false and to show his wife that she had given herself over to a cult. And it was through that process that God actually brought the man to his knees, and he actually professed Christ as Savior. And he has spent the last 40 years of his life, 30 years of his life, writing books, being a Christian apologist, going around to different churches and coming up with some great discipleship material that I've used, that we have used, all to show how, this narrow gate exists. He has said, by far the most outrageous assertion that Jesus ever made, his most politically incorrect claim of all, was when he declared in John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except by me. He is not one of many ways. He is not one road of several roads. He is not one path of several paths. He is the way, the truth, the life, and no one comes to the Father except through him. So why is this claim so controversial? And so this morning we're going to talk about 3 great myths that Strobel writes about. The first is the myth that some hold to, that all religions are basically the same. You've probably heard people say that although there are distinctions from religion to religion, all of us are trying to get us to the same place, and that is to a heavenly eternity of some type, of some sort. They all teach basically the same thing. People may believe. All of them reach the same end. And whichever one you choose to take is the right way, is one of the ways. And so when Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, the life, no one comes to the Father by me. When he says that there is a narrow path, when there is a narrow gate, that's offensive. There are definite differences between Christianity and religion. Religious leaders say, follow me and I'll show you how to find truth, but Jesus says, I am the truth. Religious leaders say, follow me and I'll show you the way to salvation, but Jesus says, I am the way to salvation. Religious leaders say, follow me and I'll show you how to become enlightened, but Jesus says, I am the light. Religious leaders say, follow me and I'll show you the door that leads to God, but Jesus says, I am the door. He says, Strobel says, for a long time, people have tried to harmonize the religions of the world to be one and the same, but there are drastic, irreconcilable differences between the two. He says, every other religion I've seen is based on people doing something to earn the favor of God. They have to say a Tibetan prayer. They have to go on a pilgrimage. They have to give alms. They have to avoid certain foods. They have to pray in a specified way, or they have to go through a series of reincarnations. Jesus Christ said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He narrows the path. He narrows the gate. A second myth is that Christianity is just as valid as any other religion. In other words, if there are differences between Christianity and other religions, they still have equal claims to the truth. That each religion has its truth. But here's the thing. Jesus proved that he's the way, the truth, and the life. There is no one else out there that has called a dead man to come back to life after being dead for 4 days. There is no one else out there that has taken a blind man, spit into some mud and put it on his eyes and tell him to go wash it off, that healed the blind man. There is no one who has taken a lame man that was lowered in front of him on his mat and told him to stand up and to pick up your mat and walk. There is no man who took a couple of bread and fish and fed 5,000. There is no one who stopped a funeral procession in the middle of the street to tell the dead boy in the casket to sit up. There is no one who's predicted his own death and resurrection and then did it. We would call anyone who made such claims a crazy man. But Jesus did those things because we trust that he is God incarnate, God in the flesh. You can go to the tombs of other so-called religious leaders, and people do, and people pray outside those tombs. You can try to find a tomb that houses Jesus, but he would come up empty. When Jesus said, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life," he follows that up with his death, burial, and resurrection. He didn't just claim he was the one and only Son of God, Strobel says. He validated it like no one else in history. The third myth is that Christians are narrow-minded to say that Jesus is the only way. The thing is that Jesus never said, "I'm the best way." Jesus never said, "I'm the one of many ways. You can choose which one to go through." He said that he was it. He was the only way. Does that make us narrow-minded? No, it makes us unique. Unique. What might you say to a parent whose baby girl developed jaundice, took the baby to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Well, if you put her in the light for a few minutes every day, it'll jumpstart her liver to start producing the enzymes to go through her body to circumvent the jaundice." What if that parent decided, instead I'm going to just rub alcohol all over her instead? We would think that the parent was crazy, wouldn't we? I mean, we know that what the treatment for jaundice is. We know the best way to fight it. Was the doctor narrow-minded in that this was the only way to cure the baby of its jaundice? Or did the doctor know the only way? Strobel says that we all have a terminal illness called sin, and the reason we cling to Christ is because he is called the great physician. He knows the cure. We can try to scrub away our sin by every means that's at our disposal, but unless we humble ourselves and fall before Christ and acknowledge his death on the cross for the forgiveness of sin, our efforts will return void. The truth is, only the great physician offers a treatment that will erase the stain of sin. And it's not being narrow-minded. It's recognizing that there's only one way, one truth. Jesus says, "Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." So, in the case of eternity, being narrow-minded isn't too bad, is it? He is the only way. Pastor Jeff Strike mentions, he says, there is no room for broad-mindedness in a chemical laboratory. Water is composed of 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen. Period. There's no room for broad-mindedness when it comes to music. The skilled director will not permit his first violinist to play even so much as half a note off, or it will ruin the entire presentation. There is no room for broad-mindedness in mathematics. Neither geometry, calculus, or trigonometry allows any variation from exact accuracy. Your answer to the problem is either right or it's wrong. There is no in-between. There is no room for broad-mindedness in biology. If they are investigating a theory, and if one result of 1,000 is different from the rest, then it invalidates the entire theory. There is no broad-mindedness on the athletic field. The game is played with rules. You cannot break a rule without penalty. Otherwise, there'd be chaos on the field. But what about this rule when it comes to us? Salvation is found in no one else. For there is no other name under heaven given to men by which we must be saved. No other name. So yes, we are narrow-minded, but that doesn't make us wrong. In this case, it's better than being broad-minded. In his book, Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis makes the following statement, and I want this to be our charge. Where do you truly stand? Here's what he said. A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic or he would be the devil. You must make your choice. Either this was and is the Son of God, or else a madman, or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about him being a great human teacher. He has not left that open for us. Where do you stand? Are you entering through the narrow gate when your time comes? Let's pray. Father, as we gather together today, we recognize your authority in all things.